See what you think of this, Tom, as potentially the biggest breakthrough in catching criminals since DNA matching.
That could be right. That actually could be right. Anne Widdecombe, who was murdered, very clearly it was evidence from doorbell cameras and from CCTV in that area that actually led straight to the door of the suspect within something like 24 hours.
And she says, "Would you like a drink, sir?" And I said, of course, being on duty, I said, no, thank you. And he shifted his right arm, he pulled me tight, and he went, "Big man, 22 years, this is my last drink." And I said, "Give me 2 whiskies, please." And I gave them both to him. It was his last drink for 22 years. I'd just like to say that 97% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Speak soon.
I'm surprised it's only 97%, Simon.
This is an interesting one because it's going to be in the news more and more and more as we go through time, because it's just becoming harnessed by the police, if you like, and it's going to be controversial. But what caught my attention with this one was that it was a councillor that brought it to attention, apparently a Green Party councillor, Ria Patel, down in London. I think it was the Croydon area. And the facial recognition cameras, what she did was go onto social media and alert people to the presence of these cameras, which are obviously a great benefit to the police down there, to the Met in this case. It's something that's going to come up more and more, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's entirely predictable. Any time you get anything like this a new development in forensic science or identification, you're always going to get a pushback and a resistance. I mean, 100 years ago, it was fingerprints. Fingerprints, and there was a huge resistance to using fingerprints. It was somehow seen as being underhand to use fingerprints. It wasn't fair to use fingerprints. And there was a lot of, it's true, there was a lot of brouhaha. And this is exactly the same thing. And it doesn't surprise me. And you're going to get the radical left, the Green Party. You're going to get these people doing this all the time. I don't think it will make one iota of difference, because I think that facial recognition has now been developed to such an extent it's going to be an enormous boon to security and law enforcement, ranging from the huge problem they've got now in most city centres with organised shoplifting, gang shoplifting. Now, this is not a couple of wee laddies going in and stealing a bag of crisps. This is organised crime in a big way, shoplifting to order, and facial recognition is going to be an absolute key in that, and help retailers who are really struggling with this. They really are.
Tom, I think we'll come back to that, because there's been legal arguments. This is London Council, where the Greens have got a big a lot of influence, and they're basically calling for statutory controls, and that's an argument that always comes out. But the same with fingerprints, the same with any new technology that comes into the mainstream and has to be used. It has to be controlled and regulated so that it's fit for court at the end of the day. Yeah. But what I was going to ask you was to play devil's advocate a wee bit, because what they would say, I think, if they were here, something that those against it or looking for regulation would say, does the fact that the technology can catch criminals justify routinely scanning thousands of completely innocent people?
Yes, it does. And if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. Remember, this was the same argument was used with public CCTV systems, 30 years ago when they first came into town centres. And it was, it's going to catch innocent people. And of course it hasn't. What it's done is deterred quite a few, and it's been absolutely crucial in criminal investigation, in the investigation of serious crime. To the extent, Simon, that now the first thing you do if you're forming up a major inquiry team, you appoint an audiovisual information technology officer to go and harvest and reclaim or the doorbell coverage or the traffic CCTV, the cameras which are in ATM machines. That's one of the first things you do. And it's an absolutely vital part of evidence. And of course, we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks the Anne Widdecombe case of Anne Widdecombe, who was murdered. Very clearly, it was evidence from doorbell cameras and from CCTV in that area that actually led straight to the door of the suspect within something like 24 hours. It's going to become hugely important. And yes, of course, it's got to be controlled. And yes, of course, there's got to be quality controls. And don't forget, Simon, each case will stand on its merits and will be subject to scrutiny in a court. And a defence lawyer will quite rightly try and pick holes in it. So it's not just going to be used willy-nilly. It'll meet the same standards of evidence as any other piece of technical evidence. But I think it's going to be a huge boon, and we're stupid if we don't grasp it.
I was only playing a wee bit devil's advocate there, Tom, because if a cop can stand in the street and look at thousands of people walking past, then there's no difference for me if we can automate that and have something that's watching thousands of faces going by because of the type of people that we're going to identify doing that. Before I come on to that, and I've got a wee story to tell you that maybe backs that up as well, just to get it on record properly, the Green MP, Sean Berry, has also called for statutory control, saying that it lacks adequate safeguards, which may well be true at the moment. That's fine. The other side of the argument, of course, is that the facial recognition, the government consider it to be a major crime-fighting tool, and the police minister, Sarah Jones, has described it, see what you think of this, Tom, as potentially the biggest breakthrough in catching criminals since DNA matching.
That could be right. That actually could be right. And the one thing I was going to say to you was you're talking about, what's the difference between a CCTV camera and a policeman standing on the street corner. The difference is this, that the CCTV camera is never off duty. It's there 24/7, always watching. And it's not subject to human fallibility. So it's not looking round and scratching its nose or having an off day or chatting to somebody and missing something as they pass by the streets.
Sorry, I forgot you were thinking about Edinburgh cops, of course.
I'm thinking about all police officers, street police officers. And I know that's something that's alien to likes yourself, but that's the reality of it. Absolutely.
Tom, there was a legal development in April 26, apparently, at the High Court, when it rejected a challenge to the Met's live facial recognition policy, finding that the revised policy complied with Articles 8, 10 and 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights. So we're going down that road, and that's what happens over a period of time. We fine-tune these things. But the real part of it for me is what a boon it is and going to be across the country when it's rolled out further. The wee story I was going to tell you was that I used to work in the Isle of Bute in Rossi, and we had an offence, a sexual offence committed, a serious sexual offence, and the witness could identify him. We only had the one witness and she could identify him. And as a matter of urgency, I took her down. The ferry was about to come in and obviously leave again. And I took her down to the car park where people queue to go on the ferry. And we sat and watched the vehicles and watched the pedestrians going on. And she identified the guy and we arrested him and went to court. And the sheriff was an Irvin Smith, who you'll be well aware of, quite a famous Glasgow sheriff. But nonetheless, it never went to appeal. But he held that it was even better than an ID parade. Having the witness there to watch hundreds of people going onto the ferry was better than arresting him and taking him to the police station and putting him in a parade.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. But where it used to go badly wrong, and it was a habit, I think, more prevalent over your side of the country than ours. But maybe I'm not going to plead innocence to it either. Was this sort of walk-by identification, where if you had a suspect sitting in an office, an open door, and you took a witness along the corridor and said, do you see anybody you know, that sort of thing, that can be dangerous. And that can fail the test before a jury. So you've got to be careful about that.
I think before we go on to the second part of this, Tom, the uses for the police, I should point out, and you can maybe explain it in better detail, the importance of identification in any case that's going to be successful in any court. Certainly in Scotland. In the UK, identification is the stone that many a case can fall on, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. And of course, eyewitness identification is one thing, but that's got to be corroborated. And we've spoken about corroboration before, but for our audiences not in Scotland, maybe don't understand what that means. It means that you cannot be convicted in a court in Scotland on the basis of one strand of evidence. So if somebody comes along and says that Simon McLean, he was a rascal, I saw doing something absolutely reprehensible, people may believe it, but there's got to be another strand of evidence to support it. And that's where fingerprints come in. That's where DNA comes in. That's where CCTV comes in. That's where a corroborating witness comes in. That's where all that comes in. It's because there's got to be two strands of evidence.
Good, Tom. Thanks for doing that. The thing I was thinking about as soon as I read this was warrants and what a boon it would be. But I don't know about you guys soon. They used to be exactly the same all over the country and all over the world, probably. More and more people get released by the courts or don't appear in court. The proceedings are started in their absence, and hence the court has to issue a warrant to bring that person before the court to answer the charge. And every police station, again, in the world will have, we had going back in time, of course, but we had a folder and a series of them, actually. They were alphabetical with outstanding warrants. And somebody could pick me up on this that worked with me back in the day, but I can think of at least 100 or more in there at any one time. And now and again, and the sergeant would come up in the morning and take them down to the shift if there was not much going on, maybe a Sunday morning or something like that, Tom. And the troops would go out and put some doors in at 7 o'clock in the morning to try and keep the warrants down to a manageable level. Does that ring a bell?
It does. It's important to say, too, that there are different kinds of warrants.
Yes.
Now, for instance, you would quite often get a non-payment warrant.
Yeah.
Now, this is for somebody who's perhaps been fined and perhaps has been given 6 weeks to pay or has been fined to pay in increments and has failed to keep up that payment. And that's a non-payment to fine warrant, which is the sort of bottom end of the thing. And then you get the straight petition warrant at the very top.
Yeah.
And that's somebody who has failed to appear in the court on a very serious charge, a petition warrant being someone under solemn procedure. Now, first of all, these two are not the same seriousness. And the straight petition warrant, that's got to be acted upon immediately.
Yeah.
And I think it was last week we were discussing a case where a culprit had a warrant outstanding. It was a man convicted of murdering the 2-year-old daughter of his partner.
Stepdaughter.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And he'd had a warrant, I think a petition warrant, a very serious warrant, which had been outstanding for 18 months and had not been acted upon. And that is dangerous. What we did latterly was we had so many warrants and it was so difficult to enforce them, just allocating them to beat cops, that we actually got a couple of very senior hands, very senior cops, older cops, and appointed them as warrant officers. And what they did was, in a division, and what they did was they went out and tried to execute as many of these serious warrants, top-end warrants, as they possibly could. The other ones, I mean, how often has it happened? It used to happen all the time. You would stop someone in the street, they'd be a bit lippy to you, you would stop them, you would check them out, and you'd find out there were 2 warrants for them. Guess what? And then you would find out there were 2 warrants in Blackpool or something like that.
That's right.
And you had to arrange an escort or had to get the warrant holding force. It was our duty. If it was our warrant, we had to go and collect these people.
Yeah.
And so you would have to travel away down to some places and you would get someone, and it would be a warrant for non-payment of fine of about £10, and it cost you about 50 quid to go and get them. You know, that sort of thing.
Tom, I remember a guy was locked up in I don't remember where we locked him up, but the warrant was in the Met, and they wanted him. It was quite. I think he was going down for 20 odd years. I can't remember the exact details. In fact, I know it was 22 years, and you'll know that as well when I tell you the punchline, because him and I went to the airport and got put on the plane. In those days, just one went on the plane, cuffed to him, of course. We're cuffed together. He's on my left hand, so they always took you on last and put you up the back of the plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we come on the back and we get sat up the back so that nobody can see the cufflinks that we've got on. And then, of course, we're only flying to the Met, but we got offered a drink because the drinks trolley came round. And she says, "Would you like a drink, sir?" And I said, of course, being on duty, I said, no, thank you. And he shifted his right arm, he pulled me tight, and he went, "Big man, 22 years, this is my last drink." And I said, "Give me 2 whiskies, please." And I gave them both to him. It was his last drink for 22 years. Well, that's before they got off with a third of their sentence or something like that. Of course, Tom, I wouldn't be bothered.
And that's before drink and drugs were freely available in prison as well. I had a very funny experience. There was a guy. He was a squaddy. He was a soldier, and he got in some trouble when I was up at Craig Miller's DS, and he was arrested for it was a domestic assault. Actually, he was assaulted his wife. Anyway, the warrant came out for him, and he was down at Aldershot, and I had to go down to Aldershot to get him. So I went down to Aldershot to get him. And I was joined there by a member of the military police. He was a lovely guy. And he was coming up to Edinburgh. He says, "I'll come with you, see." So we were going to go on the train. And of course, it's the same thing. You're put in a separate compartment. However, he'd obviously done this a lot because what he did was he went into the station at Aldershot and explained that this guy was an extremely violent and disruptive prisoner, and he wanted the train guard to be aware of the fact that this was a. So what happened was we got a first class carriage to ourselves. This wee, nice. Obviously, he was a tiny wee timorous wee guy. He wouldn't, he was no more a threat than flying there. But clearly, this guy from the SIB, the Special Investigation Branch of the Military Police, had done this many, many times before.
Yes,
and he knew how to travel in comfort.
Lots of these stories, Tom, but probably still classified, a lot of them as well.
Yes, well,
going to pick up prisoners and going to take prisoners elsewhere. Yeah. Just before we finish with this, Tom, in case anybody is thinking, "Oh, wait a minute, I've heard of this one, I've heard of that one." I just was looking at a wee list of them there, just to search warrants, obviously, we'll speak about again, no doubt. Arrest warrants is what you've been talking about there, to bring a named person before the court. And of course, you can crave a warrant for someone. They don't have to have been already at the court and out in bail, which is another thing we'll talk about in future. An apprehension warrant, I think, is what you were talking about. And a bench warrant when the court, somebody's failed to appear. I think that's an English term, the bench warrant.
Yes.
For that procedure. European arrest warrant, of course, which is becoming more and more popular these days. And an extradition warrant, which we're going to cover when we talk about another topic this week, probably. A warrant for further detention, I think that's England and Wales. And of course, these days, something that we were never really bothered with are surveillance warrants, and something you'll be aware of is interference warrants, where you're looking to intercept calls or radio waves or whatever it might be. That's all done under warrants, and you have to justify. The thing about getting a warrant is that the evidence has to be there to justify, especially a search warrant. You have to appear before a magistrate or a sheriff and justify the reason why you want that search warrant.
Yeah. Just to say that the bench warrant in Scotland is what you call a non-appearance warrant.
Right.
And the recall, I mean, we used to get quite a lot of that. People getting recalled particularly to mental hospitals. Yep. People who had been discharged and for some reason, obviously they were assessed continuously and there must have been some concern about them, but they were recalled and we'd get very quick notice to send supporting officers with the hospital staff to go and get this guy back or this woman back. And so there's quite a lot of that. And of course, the non-payment warrants.
Yes.
But it was a straight...
Or a means warrant. Was that not a means warrant?
The means inquiry. Means inquiry. A means inquiry warrant was difficult, was different again, because a means inquiry warrant was somebody who's failed to pay a fine and is going to be brought before a court so that they can be asked why and other arrangements made. You know, if they can't pay a £5 a week, can they pay £1 a week? That sort of thing.
Tom, they used to go to Rossi Sheriff Court and they would say, "Can I pay 50p a week for the next 374 weeks. And Irvin Smith always had a quip. You know, he was so witty on it and so quick. But you didn't ever laugh in his court, that's for sure. But he would look over the top of his specs and say, do you think this is a catalogue that you're paying here? Oh, dear.
Very good, very good. Yeah,
the final point there, Tom, was the facial recognition. That'll be a boon, but it'll be a lot of work for the police when realising that warrants are outstanding for people that are being recognised on these cameras.
I think you'll find that artificial intelligence will match it up. I think you'll find there'll be a database, a bit like the DNA database. It'll start slowly, but it'll grow. And I think you'll find that you'll get pinged and said that you'll get a message up saying that such and such so-and-so wanted on this and that is presently walking eastwards on Princess Street at location, map reference number so-and-so, so-and-so. Now, responding to that, that's a different matter. But I think artificial intelligence will speed a lot of that up. And I think the sooner the police service can safely and professionally and proportionately embrace that, the better. Because it's the only way they're going to be able to compensate for the lack of manpower, but which is critical across the criminal justice system. I mean, there's a big brouhaha just now about early releases from prisons and about court decisions and about policing, and all of that is symptomatic of the same thing. We've had a decade of salami slicing of resources across the criminal justice system. And I read a very interesting statistic the other day there, that the whole annual budget for the entire criminal justice system in the UK is the same as 2 weeks of the benefit system payouts in the UK.
Oh dear.
Now,
there's another debate entirely.
Now that puts it in context.
Yeah. See, before we move on, Tom, I'd just like to say that 97% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Speak soon.
I'm surprised it's only 97%, Simon.
Cheers.